Hey there, Colts fans. This is Nathan Brown, your Colts insider with the Indianapolis Star, here with Joel A. Erickson as we get ready for what I expect to be a very busy behind the scenes 4 days ahead of the opening of free agency on Monday. This is the Colts Cover 2 podcast. A lot to talk about here on this Thursday afternoon. We're taping, just in case some news breaks, a timestamp here. It is just a couple minutes after noon on Thursday. We've had some busy days over the last 48 hours between Daniel Jones receiving the transition tag on Tuesday afternoon. We had a talk show appearance by Alec Pierce yesterday that caused a lot of a big stir in the Colts fan base. And those two players, of course, are who we are going to lead off this episode with. They are, of course, the focal point of Colts free agency at the moment. And until they are both truly locked in on long-term deals, there will be some question marks as to what this foundation of this team in 2026 and beyond is going to be, and what they can and will do in free agency. So maybe the best place to start, the big looming deadline here this week was Tuesday at 4 p.m. That was, of course, the deadline where teams could use either the exclusive, the non-exclusive franchise tags, or the transition tag on one player. The Colts, who have only used any one tag of any kind a single time in GM Chris Ballard's tenure here with the Colts since 2017, felt like for weeks upon weeks they were probably going to have to use one of them. They, of course, did. They chose Daniel Jones. They used the less expensive transition tag, which though it saves you $6 million in the cap figure if they don't get anything long-term done with Daniel, it does open them up a bit more to having another team swoop in and make him an offer that for whatever reason they might not be willing to match. And then Daniel would, of course, be able to walk free, and the Colts would not get any draft compensation for that. So that's a good place to start, Joel, on Tuesday when we finally got that news, even though it felt like that was the direction things were trending for a couple days. What was your initial reaction to seeing Daniel Jones getting that transition tag?
This is where I'm at, and I don't know how to necessarily put it. My understanding of the whole message of this offseason, beginning with Carly Ursay-Gordon explaining why she brought Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen back, through the combine when Chris Ballard said we Alec or Daniel and Alec are such big pieces, we move and fit from there. Like my whole understanding of that is that these guys were these guys like that they felt like they had to get these guys back. The whole bet, my understanding is that they had this really good they felt like they had this really good offense at the beginning of the year. They wanted to bring that back and then build on that, and that's how they were going to make the playoffs. If you don't get either of those guys back, I don't understand the vision at all. And you can punch holes in that vision. We can get into that in a little bit. Like, you can obviously punch holes in that vision, but like, just in terms of what I was expecting the Colts to do based on what they said, not based on me, based on what they said with their faces. I don't fully understand this if they don't get these guys back.
Yeah, it felt like we were talking a little bit off pod before we got rolling here. It felt like you could have, I guess, gone about this a couple different ways. It appears the way the Colts thinking was on this, and of course, the best case scenario, of course, by Tuesday of this week is that you have long-term deals done with both these guys, and you don't even have to use a tag. And there are several reasons why that is beneficial. But if that is your dream scenario and you're not quite able to get there, what seems like was going through the Colts mind, and I don't know that I disagree with it necessarily, because of how valuable the quarterback position is in this league, and because of how thin not only the free agent class at quarterback is, but the draft class at quarterback, and the fact that the Colts don't have a first round pick either this year or next year. Daniel Jones, for whatever you want to make of his injury history and the fact that he's recovering from an Achilles tear, both things, both gripes that I think are 100% fair. His ceiling, I believe, is higher, or maybe his ceiling and what we think his reasonable expectation for a floor will be, I think, is higher out there than anyone else who's going to be on the market. The quarterback free agency draft class drops off really quickly after you get past Daniel Jones. You have Malik Willis, who is a backup this year and the last couple of years. You have kind of a bunch of career backups, and Marcus Mariota and Mitchell Trubisky, a really old Joe Flacco. You've got Aaron Rodgers, who doesn't know if he's coming back yet or not. And you've got Fernando Mendoza in the draft, who's going to go number 1 to the Raiders. And then after that, no one really knows if there's even going to be a quarterback taken in the rest of the first round. And so when you are the Colts, even if you felt comfortable, even if you felt pretty good about your odds of re-signing Daniel Jones and the relationship there with Daniel and the front office and Daniel and Shane Steichen, it's just, I think, when you're going into a season, even though Carly Gordon hasn't said this is an all or nothing year, for all intents and purposes, it really feels that way for a team that hadn't been in the playoffs in 5 years. And so I just don't think you could risk going into Monday when the legal tampering period begins and not have at least some ties made to Daniel Jones. And so that's the route that the Colts opted here. They opted for the least expensive one, the one that at least gave them a position where they could see what his market was and maybe say to themselves, we will pay you whatever anyone else believes you are worth being paid. But we want to see what that market is. But when you do that, now it seems like you're going to go into Monday where teams can start formally talking to players and their agents. And Alec Pierce is going to get a chance to figure out what his market value is. And the Colts, beyond being one of those 32 bidders, don't necessarily have any upper hand outside of the fact that the Colts can say that Daniel Jones is almost certainly going to be back in 2026.
Well, that's I think something that's gotten lost in the discussion here. Like, in terms of who do you get first? Like, Alec Pierce doesn't want to be here if Daniel Jones isn't here. That full stop. Like, that's the whole thing is, do you have Daniel Jones? How long do you have Daniel Jones for? We're taping this on Wednesday, right? This is Wednesday?
Thursday. I know. I forget which day of the week it is too.
Is it Thursday?
I know. It's been a week.
Goodness. That's even worse. It is Thursday. Anyway, on Wednesday, he was on the Kay Adams show, and he said if they get a long-term deal done with Daniel, that would go a long way. So it's clear that him and his representation do not see the transition tag as a commitment to Daniel Jones that convinces him that he should come. Mm-hmm. And people, I think you can be cynical and be like, well, he's going to go where the money is. But like Alec Pierce, trust me, I know Alec Pierce well. I talk to people around Alec Pierce. Few receivers understand more like how much a quarterback can affect a player's career than Alec Pierce. Because 2 years ago, a lot of Colts fans thought he was terrible and didn't want him on the roster. And a lot of that had to do with the quarterback.
Alec Pierce has had 9 quarterbacks throw him balls in his career in 4 years in the NFL.
Alternately, not throw him the ball when he's open.
Also true.
In the case of someone who started most of 2023. And so, like, he understands that. And it's, yes, you get the guaranteed money up front, but you're not going to see the back half of the deal if you don't have the right quarterback. So that's the issue, is like you have to have Jones, but it can't just be on a tag. Like they're not, these guys aren't dumb. They know how this stuff works. They need long term. They need a long term deal. That's the key. Like
Mm-hmm.
if with Daniel Jones, and if until they have that, I don't see anything happening with Alec Pierce. Not they're just based on that's just based on my conversations with like his public conversations, but also everything I've been told for a while.
Mm-hmm. So let's, I'm pulling up the story from yesterday. So if you have not watched the videos or watched the whole interview, I think it was somewhere close to 15 minutes long. Kay Adams, who hosts the Up and Adams show, was able to get Alec Pierce along with some other guests on her show yesterday midday. Um, and I think the most important quote in all of that, and the one that I think I would say is the newsiest part of that, was when she asked Alec about, once they got through kind of talking through Daniel Jones getting tagged and his relationship with Daniel. She got to the point where she asked him, um, how the news of not being tagged and Daniel getting the transition tag but not having a full multi-year contract done, how that would affect what he would do come next week. And he said, at this point now, it's like I love Indy. I love playing there. It's a great organization, great people in the city, just a ton of support. I know we haven't been as good as we could be, and I know that we can be. But at this point, I've kind of earned the right to explore free agency and see what's out there and just make a decision that's best for my career and my family. So when I hear that, and I know how this stuff works, there can be some things said publicly that maybe don't fully reflect a player or their management's thought process behind the scenes. You can use some public pressure to try to get things done, whether that's get it done with Daniel so that then Alec would be incentivized to get a deal done before we get to Monday. There's certainly a chance that that could happen, but when I hear that, I mean, it really truly sounds like he would love to stay here, but he at this point with 4 days to go until he and his management can talk to teams around the league, it really truly sounds like Alec Pierce is actually going to hit free agency, which is, I mean, I don't know how you felt. Something I just could not fathom happening a month or two ago.
It's never let a guy get close to free agency. Just don't do it. I thought about this the other day. In baseball, which is a different sport, and obviously, guys get re-signed in football all the time. In their last year in baseball, if a guy gets within 1 year of free agency, he never gets signed, almost never, because they know if they get to the open market, there's big money coming, and you just can't let Alec Pierce get close to free agency because the numbers that people are throwing around are going to surprise some Colts fans. Like, I don't think $30 million a year is out of the question.
Mm-mm.
And then on top of that, if you get it from a team that has a good, stable quarterback situation, and you can't promise him that, then your price goes up too. Like, you're not even on the thing. So you just can't let a guy get close to free agency. They could have offered this stuff earlier. They could have tried to lock him up earlier, I think is part of it for me. And maybe they would have had a better chance. But instead they decided to wait, and this is what you get.
I almost wonder too, kind of just coming to me now, I wonder how much Daniel's injury, not only his his fractured fibula that came bubbled to the surface in the end of November, as well as his of course his torn Achilles. I wonder how the combination of those injuries affected the Colts' willingness to give Daniel an extension mid-season, and then therefore affect either their willingness or Pierce's willingness to talk about an extension in the end of the season. Because certainly from the comments that we have heard both publicly and privately, Alec didn't want to commit to the Colts until they had their quarterback situation figured out. But I wonder if there could have been a time, say a couple months ago, where he might have been he might have independently been willing to talk about an extension without Daniel being secured, maybe just even under the presumption that was going to happen, because this team was, this team was 8-2. They had the best offense in the NFL, and Alec Pierce was a big part of that. I know it sounds like talks maybe got going a little bit later than Alec might have anticipated, but it seems like, just from listening to what he said yesterday, talking to Kay Adams, it sounds like they had a dialogue with the Colts that they kind of had to figure out Daniel's stuff before things with Alec really started to ramp up, and maybe there was going to be a conversation yesterday. But I just wonder to myself if there would have been a time frame if the Colts had been willing to do that. And I know that's doesn't seem to like it's Chris Ballard's MO to work outside of kind of this typical window of February and March to get a lot of these things done long term. But I just wonder if there would have been a window where they could have locked him down long term, probably for a little bit cheaper price, if they had been willing to do that.
Yeah, he's done it before. He signed Jack Doyle in the middle of the season. He signed Grover Stewart in the middle of the season. You might have had a chance to do it with Alec Pierce if you could convince him, like, we're not going to let Daniel out of the building. I don't know. One of the other things that's going around here is there's a significant amount of question, I think, where some people are saying, would you rather have Kyler Murray on for $1.3 million than Daniel Jones at whatever he's going to cost? Murray's deal is very interesting. Like, that doesn't happen very often, that there's offsets in a contract. Like, just thinking back to last year, the Colts paid Jones $14 million. He was also still in the middle of his deal when he got cut. The injury concerns are significant. I think that is definitely fair. He's only played one full season. He's got two major injuries in his history. Those are definitely fair. I don't think Kyler is a great fit with Shane Steichen. I know I've seen people saying, like, he fits the Colts offense really well. I don't really think he does.
Maybe the Colts offense of like 2023, before they found out what it could be with a quarterback that's more like Daniel Jones. I don't know, maybe.
Maybe. Shane Steichen wants to run what he ran last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially, I think, in like a make or break year, like, the urgency has never been higher. That's what we kept hearing, right? Well, if the urgency's never been higher, like, you want your guy. And everything we heard from the combine, and really everything we heard last year, is that Daniel Jones is Shane Steichen's guy. I think the Colts are higher on him than maybe anybody, us included, writers included. Like, I think the Colts are higher on Jones, which makes it like, I do get it, because the fact that they had to transition tag him for just shy of $38 million represents a significant uptick from what Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold got. They signed 3-year deals worth around $33 million, or a little bit more than that, in average annual value. And I'm sure the Colts keep saying, hey, this is the comp. The comp is these guys. I don't think, though, and maybe this is what I missed and what Daniel Jones' agents are saying. I don't think Mayfield or Darnold ever signed a second contract with their original team.
I could look at that really quickly.
I don't think they ever got extended. And that could be what the agents are saying. The agents might be saying he got 4 years, $160 million before, and therefore we don't see those as comps, because those guys didn't get an extension with their previous team.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think their careers are definitely comparison worthy. I wonder if that's what they're saying, and that the Colts have already pushed it way over that by when they put the transition tag on him, they kind of set a likely floor for the average annual value of his deal, and the fact that they haven't come to a long term deal indicates that the Colts that Jones people want more than that. Um, I wonder if that's the sticking point, is that the Colts see him as Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold in terms of value, and the agency says, wait, no, a team has already paid him.
Yeah, I mean that certainly could make some sense. If you want to make the argument that Dina Jones was worth 40 million a year a few years ago, and yes, he got injured last year, but he also proved when he was healthy um, that he is still that guy and he still has that in him. Then yeah, you could certainly say um, that's my floor. And the cap has only gone up in the since he got that deal a few years ago. Um, Circling back to Baker Mayfield. So Baker Mayfield played with the Browns for 4 seasons. Um, so he either, again, off the top of my head, um, he must have gotten cut maybe, I guess, after that fourth year. Maybe he didn't get, whether he got a fifth year option and then the team just waived him anyways. For whatever happened, he ended up on Carolina and then the Rams in his fifth season. So he did not, it would appear, probably sign a second deal with Cleveland. Could look that up later. But so yeah, I hadn't thought that deep on it, but that could make some sense, and that probably is the basis on why, if you are Daniel, you don't want to sign for anything lower, and maybe where the disconnect here is that um, maybe the Colts feel like the Giants in some way overpaid for Daniel a few years ago from what he has done since then, going from getting a massive deal to getting released, within less than 2 years. As amazing as that sounds.
And listen, like, here's the thing. I think of him. I want to say, like, I think of him as a Mayfield Darnold thing. But and I know some people are gonna hear that and go, well, then he should accept that deal. He doesn't have to do that.
No, I saw someone on.
But I think
I saw
doesn't matter.
someone in my mentions today say on X that, like, if the fact that they haven't been able to reach a deal with Daniel Jones shows me what kind of guy he is, because he's not willing to sign something that then would allow them to bring back, solidify Alec and make room. Look, athletes windows for their careers are very small, and if Daniel Jones lands a massive deal and goes out and shreds another one of his tendons or ligaments, and his career is over very soon, he has got to go and do what is best for himself. I know there are a lot of it's hard to see as a fan sometimes, a player doing something selfishly, but the teams are also being selfish. They are trying to spend as little money as humanly possible because they want to make the entire team better. And they have a little bit over $300 million, and they have to look out for more than just Daniel Jones. They have to look out for their other free agents and people who they want to sign in free agency that are not currently on the Colts. They can't just, so you've got two parties who are trying to be selfish here and see if in their selfishness that they can find some common ground, basically.
Yeah, that's. Listen, I get it, and I would say, as a fan of other teams, my favorite guys tend to be guys who stuck around when they maybe could have held, like, they could have gotten more elsewhere. Um, but for the most part, that's not going to happen very often. Like, it's just, especially it's just not going to happen very often. I think if you put yourself in the situation, it kind of makes sense. Like, um, if you can get more, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You know, like, the Colts franchise tag Peyton Manning twice. It's not like Peyton was just accepting tiny deals to do whatever. structure or whatever, but like generally guys are going to try to maximize their worth, and that's that. I think the biggest thing is just expecting someone just agree to what the team says and stuff like that is just, it's a little bit like naive on how the business of the game works. And I would say that there's a piece of me that wants to do that too. Like, oh, I wish this guy would just say, oh, I'm in a good situation here, I'm going to stay there. But like it's just not how it works. They have to be advocates for themselves because the team will get rid of them and cut them. And like Jones knows that better than anybody.
Yep.
Jones just got cut by the Giants, so they have to make the right decision for themselves.
100%. Yeah. I mean, was he not? I think he was like kind of playing for his career in that 2022 season where he led the Giants to the playoffs. They got a playoff win. I guess if I'm remembering correctly and thinking about all of this in the right frame of mind, they maybe didn't pick up his 5th-year option. And he was maybe going to be a restricted or an unrestricted free agent come the 2022, or I guess what would have been the 2023 offseason. And he went and won them a playoff game and earned his big deal. So he's kind of been in this position before, and he's seen the highs of that, and he's also seen the lows where he plays in basically a season and a half on that contract and gets cut because the production is going down. The team feels like it wants to go in a different direction, and he ends up as a backup on the Vikings and then playing on a prove-it deal with the Colts in 2025 for all of $14 million. When I think about those numbers, I don't know. Part of me just thinks if the Colts really wanted to say pay him $35 million a year and Daniel really wanted 42 or 43, I just wonder if they couldn't have found some common ground where they could have gotten him locked up at that number, even if it felt a little bit high. As you said, the cap is going to continue to go up, and if they signed him at say 43 or so a year for the next 3 years, a couple years down the road, especially if that's not all guaranteed, which you have to think it probably wouldn't have been, given his injury history and the fact that almost no quarterback gets a fully guaranteed, except for Deshaun Watson. Almost no quarterback gets a fully guaranteed deal anymore these days. It's just, I just wonder with everything that they have said this offseason about how he is their guy and where the quarterback market is, it just surprises me a little bit that they couldn't find a way to get this done, knowing that getting this done could have then guaranteed that Alec Pierce would have been on the roster, and knowing that they could have done some cap gymnastics to make those cap hits for those two guys so small that they could have gone out and signed a Trey Hendrickson or someone like that. I'm not saying that they can't, and we can get into that more here in just a little bit, but it just seems like this is becoming more complicated and frankly maybe more expensive than it needed to be, and more difficult to do everything that you want to do this offseason to come into 2026 with the type of roster that you feel like you need to, if you're the Colts front office, to accomplish everything that you think this team can.
The larger question, I think, and maybe the right one, is should the Colts be all in on Daniel Jones? But the hard part is they've said they are. I don't know how to put this in a way that makes sense. Like, if you don't believe in Daniel Jones, if you think he's not worth anything, which I know there are some people out there who don't think Daniel Jones was good at all last year, that's fine. But the team doesn't see that. The team doesn't say that. The team hasn't been saying that. They haven't seen that. They think he's a guy. And so I think sometimes for you and I, our job is to analyze and look at it based on we explain what they are doing more than we present all like alternate realities, because it's just hard. It's hard once you start thinking about alternate realities to go, like, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to think through. But in terms of actually processing what's happening on the ground, like, it's not really the the right. It's not really the right way to approach it in my mind. In terms of like, this is what the team has said they want, and I almost think it's more damning if the team says they want something and they can't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that to me is a real, like, because it just shows it shows lack of vision to me. Because I, like I said, I thought we were looking at one vision. If you don't get these guys back, I don't fully understand what the plan is.
No, I mean everything we heard, starting with the press conferences that we heard from Shane Steichen and Carly Gordon and then Chris Ballard the week after the season ended. I mean, I don't know about you, but I left those feeling like, however it was going to happen, um, getting Daniel and Alec locked in on long-term deals was kind of the um, almost like the start line for this offseason. Like it didn't feel like this offseason was really going to start in earnest without those two things happening. And then the Colts were going to, they were going to make those moves and kind of, and figure out where that left them from a cap space standpoint and move on from there instead of trying to make those moves in tandem while also trying to um, you know, sign a free agent linebacker and signed a defensive end and bolster your depth in some other positions. Like it just makes all of this, all the other things that they need to do, more complicated when these two things are not done. I mean, yes, Daniel Jones theoretically could, play at this 37.8 transition tag financial spot next year. Um, maybe the Vikings go in a different direction, and maybe there's not another team that's truly interested in making him a long-term offer when that is the floor, and the Colts, for whatever reason, don't work anything out with Daniel, and he plays at that. So technically he is secured to you, but it just I'm surprised that we're getting closer and closer to Monday. We're not there yet, of course, but we're getting closer and closer to Monday, and this isn't done. And they're trying to do this while also trying to figure out some other things. I just think it makes that more difficult. It makes it more difficult when you don't know for certain what you can offer Trey Hendrickson, or how and whether you should restructure some of your guys who are on deals beyond 2026, or whose last season is in 2026 and you want to think about extending them. There's just now a lot to do before we get to Monday in a best case scenario, when we've had now 2 months since the end of the season to try and get some of this done.
Yeah, it just feels short-sighted. I don't know. It just feels like it's some like it. I always think about, like, how is a team getting better, and if you lose Alec Pierce, like, okay, just go draft someone. That's great. They tried that with AD Mitchell, and he didn't work out here.
Mm-hmm.
The Chiefs have drafted 4 people trying to get an Alec Pierce and haven't found one. Like it's not that simple. Um, so, and maybe in the long run, say in the long run, Alec Pierce goes somewhere else. He never really gets above the 50 catch or 60 catch mark, and that deal looks bad for them. That deal looks bad for whoever the acquiring team is. That's great for the Colts, but it will not help the 2026 Colts at all.
Yeah,
And Carly Gordon already placed an increased sense of urgency, whatever, I think we all kind of know what that means, on the 2026 Colts.
Yep. Yeah, someone else could go and sign Alec to a $30 million deal over 3 or 4 years, and that could look bad in hindsight. But there's no reason to think I don't think, I guess within reason, unless you're paying him an insane amount of money. There's just no reason in my mind to think that the Colts are better off in 2026 without Alec Pierce on their roster. And I don't know that there's a reason to think why he can't play an even bigger role in this offense. I mean, he reached 1,000 yards last year, even though the last 7 games of that season were complete chaos. And he actually, I mean, he certainly in comparison to Michael Pittman Jr. from a production standpoint, I like for for as much as the offense petered off when Daniel Jones was um, hobbled and then out, and then you brought in Philip Rivers for 3 games and then finished things off with Riley Leonard. Um, Pierce still kind of held his own, even though his stats kind of went up and down a little bit. And that just, I think, in some ways shows you that he could take on a little bit more, a little bit larger load. Now it's tough to divvy up the balls to go around when you've got Pierce and Pittman and Warren and Josh Downs. Um, I know he was talking on Kay Adams' show yesterday about how he would like to be in that, you know, without question, wide receiver one spot on wherever he plays next, and getting somewhere between 130 to 150 targets. That seems like a really high number, and I don't know how they would go about getting him that volume level if he is still on the Colts, and if, say, Michael Pittman Jr. is still on this team. It's just going to be tough to get enough passes to go around when you also have a great back that you can rely on heavily in certain situations in Jonathan Taylor. But I still would think in a full season with Daniel Jones, with this offense operating at full tilt, why there's no reason why he can't have 110 to 120 targets maybe, and play a bigger role. But we'll see where that gets to. One thing I think is worth mentioning is we've talked about contracts for both of these guys. You mentioned the $30 million figure for Pierce. That seems like it could be feasible to hit. I know that sounds like a lot, when our minds are kind of set on where those contracts used to be for wide receivers, and the cap has obviously taken off a bunch in the last 5 to 10 years in the NFL. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 receivers in the NFL right now who make an average of at least $30 million. I think you can make an argument. Maybe Alec Pierce isn't a top 10 wide receiver in the league. I think in some ways, when you're paying him that amount of money, you're paying him a little bit on what you think his trajectory is. And so maybe he's not worth that in the beginning, but you think that by the time he's 28 or 29, if he's playing with a good, reliable quarterback in a good offense, maybe he finally gets worth that. And as the cap moves and some other wide receivers here in that list re-up, like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson or a CeeDee Lamb, when they get new contracts, they're certainly going to continue to make more, and there'll be young guys who get deals who are worth more than Alec, and maybe he's not in that top 10 for more than a year or two when things shake out. The quarterbacks are a little bit more interesting because there are some guys like Patrick Mahomes, who I think is outside the top 10 in average annual value, because he's on a 10-year deal at the moment. You've got Dak Prescott at the ceiling at $60 million. You've, I think, got somewhere around 10 guys who are making at least 50 million. And another, another 5 who are making at least 40. So a contract for Daniel Jones around $45 million puts him only in the top 12 or so in the league. I think if Daniel Jones is fully healthy, I think you could, maybe he's not a top 12 guy in the league all the time, but he was certainly playing like it in the first 10 games of last year. Yes, I think you dock him a little bit for his injury history, because if you're putting him on a multi-year deal, there's going to be a risk that one of those years he gets, some level of an injury. But I just don't know that those numbers, as crazy as they sound when we're thinking about what the league was 5 or 7 years ago, I just don't know that those are all that crazy when you think about where the cap is now, and some comps around the league, and how little money the Colts have committed to this roster beyond the end of this season.
Yeah. I I think some of it is just that there are a lot of Colts fans who wish that they just torn it all down,
Mm-hmm.
and I get it. I get that. Like I said, the hard part for us is we have to analyze where they are and where they're going, um, regardless. But I think there's a lot of Colts fans that wish that they had torn it down and that they were selling off pieces right now and they weren't trying to resign anybody. Um, and so I kind of get if I'm not here to tell you how to fan. If that's what you want, then cheer against the Colts next year, and and there you can get it.
Yeah, I mean the problem with that is that they kind of committed to this all in thing when they got Sauce Gardner back in November, because you can. I mean, I guess you can go through a multi-year tear it down period, but you can be as bad as you want this season, but you're not going to have a first round pick in 2027. So, um, and unless you go and cut a bunch of guys, like you still, it, I think with a lot of the guys on the roster, the problem is I think you're not going to have, even if you still had that first round pick, unless you start releasing a bunch of guys who are still under contract. I don't know that you're going to get to where you're one of the worst couple records in the league unless this roster seriously changes. It's not as it's currently constructed made to be a bad team. I think you can argue all you want that it's not properly constructed to make a serious run at a Super Bowl, although it maybe kind of felt like maybe there was a chance of that back in October or early November. Um, but this team is just not constructed heading into 2026 with guys like Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner and Quentin Nelson and Jonathan Taylor and Javarius Ward and Sauce Gardner and Cam Bynum, um, all under contract still. This is just not a team that is built to be really bad. And when you give your first round pick away, there's not really an incentive to do that. So I think with where they are from a draft pick standpoint, they've got to go and figure out if they can get over the hump this year, and then if you can't, you probably see a leadership change, and that 2027 season can be that bottom out season where they don't bring back a bunch of veterans and there's a big roster turnover. Maybe you have a new head coach, um, probably more than likely have a new general manager, and then that 2028 draft is when you could start taking advantage of not being good and start to do a rebuild that I know a lot of Colts fans have wanted for some time. But it just doesn't make sense to do that right now, and that's why they told us what they told us coming into the season about what the vision was for this offseason, which was re-sign their quarterback that they feel like is the foundation of the future for the Indianapolis Colts, and re-sign the wide receiver that they feel like um, is the top guy on their team for the future. Where we get to now is the fact that that's still not done yet, and it is March 5th, and we have 4 days until teams can start talking to those players, and we don't know what that future is. Real quick to kind of button all this up, um, where do you where do you feel like the Colts stand at noon come Monday, March 9th, as the legal tampering window ultimately opens up on Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce?
I feel like they end up getting Jones back ultimately. I I don't know what to expect on Pierce anymore. Um, when you start getting the money when you start getting the open market money thrown around, and you get a chance to look at other situations, things get interesting. So I really don't know. Not sure what to expect. Like we already kind of are past. Like I thought that they would go. You know what? We have to pay Daniel Jones. I thought we would be at a sign Jones tag Pierce spot. So we're already
Mm-hmm.
kind of in waters I didn't think we would end up in. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of like, okay, I thought I knew what the vision was, but maybe I was wrong.
Yeah. Kind of feels like, yeah, maybe over the next 4 days, you get Daniel finally locked in, so that at least your presentation to Alec when things open up on Monday um, comes with the ability to show him that Daniel is the quarterback of this team for the next several years. Um, I think that's got to be a bare minimum. By the time we get to Monday, you have knowing and feeling like no matter what happens with Daniel, Alec is at least going to let himself get to Monday at noon to be able to hear other teams' offers. I don't think you can be responsible as a front office and not have Daniel Jones locked up on some sort of long-term deal. Because I think if you do, I think you do really run the risk of letting Alec get out the door and walk to someone like New England, for example, who feels increasingly like a team that not only would be a great fit for Alec Pierce, but could have the space to do so. I don't have their cap space right in front of me, although I do now. The Patriots, according to Over the Cap, as things currently stand, I believe have this page will reload. At least as of a couple days ago, I know they've made some changes. They had $39 million in cap space, so that's a team that could make a pretty big run at Alec Pierce. So we will see how all of that comes together. Another thing I think is worth discussing before we close things out here on the Colts Cover 2 podcast, as we head into free agency, is maybe like a quick primer or explainer. With the Colts now a little bit over $4 million over the cap at the moment, knowing they have to get what you would say is cap compliant by the time that free agency officially opens. There certainly are some players with some big cap numbers that they could do some sort of, whether it's a release or a restructure, to help make ends meet there. What are some of your observations on where and how the Colts could move some money around, and what would make the most sense, and frankly, even how that process works from a financial standpoint to shift some of that money into the future so that they could have enough enough money to go out and try to re-sign Alec and do a long-term deal with Daniel and maybe make a move at someone like a Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah. One thing about the cap stuff, like I know it feels right now like there's like the cap situations are all very easy and but like I have to say this on this podcast every year. I covered the Saints, and every year everyone will be like, the Saints don't have any money to do anything. They'll cut their whole roster. And they had to cut some people, but they never cut their whole roster, and they usually sign somebody. And so my whole take on the cap is if a team wants to do something, they'll find a way to do it. You can restructure, you can cut, you can put void years in deals to push the cap hit back further. You can structure it a way to make it smaller. That's kind of the whole thing. I mean, that's if you're looking for a big reason why the Colts have to get a deal done with Daniel Jones, like cap relief would help. It's a really easy way to get them from what looks like almost $5 million over to being back under again, is if they change that $38 million cap hit into like 12, 14, 15, something like that. They're probably going to need to do more than that to get under and do what they need to do. But the cap stuff, like I said, if a team wants to get cap space, there are lots of ways to get cap space. Just like if you have a lot of cap space, if you're the Chargers, who apparently have $99 million in cap space, that's wild. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can just kind of go do whatever you want to do. But for these teams that are on the back end of it, like we've seen the Eagles, the Chiefs, some of these teams have been able to get under the cap pretty easily. Buffalo is technically like way over the cap, and they just traded for DJ Moore while we were doing this podcast, and guaranteed an extra $15 million of his deal. So they'll find a way to get that done. I think if we're still on the timeline where I thought we were on, then the goal is to get a pass rusher. That's the real goal. They have to sign a defensive end. They need somebody who can uh, provide pass rush on the opposite side of Laiatu Latu. Trey Hendrickson is obvious. I kind of think of Bradley Chubb as like a discount Trey Hendrickson. And then the rest of the guys on there, Jalen Phillips, Odafe Boye Mafe, I'm missing somebody in there, are Clavin Chason, are kind of the guys that Ballard has had success with in the past, guys who are still in their mid-20s, mid-career, and the Colts, kind of identify somebody who can do more.
Yeah, I think the biggest question there is, can the Colts get by with someone who is, coming into that first big contract of their careers, like Owe or Mafe, or some other of the younger guys on the free agent market who, so far in their careers maybe have had 8, 9, 10, maybe 10 sacks at most. Can you get by with someone who isn't yet proven to be a bona fide star edge rusher in this league, who either might turn into that or could be a second tier guy? Or do you think, from what we have heard from the Colts and what we saw last year, especially when you have two starters in the interior defensive line that aren't getting any younger, who are both above 30 years old, in Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. Now Buckner 2 years in a row with some injury concerns. Do you think they need to go and get a Trey Hendrickson type? I guess I don't even know. I wouldn't say Trey Hendrickson type because there's no one else on the free agent market other than like Trey Hendrickson, other than Hendrickson himself. Do you need to go and get him for this defense to be the fullest version of itself?
I mean, I think they need they need a guy. Like, they need a guy who you have to game plan for. That's been DeForest Buckner for 6 years, but like, honestly, I don't know if if you can count on him to be the same again, coming off of a very serious injury. And even if he is, we saw what happened if he misses games last year. They immediately stop being like, they need a guy. And Trey Hendrickson seems like that guy. He's got there was the core muscle stuff last year, but I also kind of feel like last year, if you wanted to make the case that like nothing was right in Cincinnati, I think that's pretty true. And they've had success with that before. Like Justin Houston was like that. Xavier Rhodes was like that. They've done well identifying the guy in his early 30s with a chip on his shoulder. The other guys are all projection, and they've done well doing that before. Like Danico Autry, when the Colts signed him, was not who Danico Autry would become. You can kind of make the same case for Jabal Sheard. Like they've done a good. Samson Ebicom had his best season before in his first year with Indianapolis before tearing his Achilles. They've done a good job of that, but I also would say none of those guys are really like the type of player who does what I'm saying and really alters the pass rush. It's really just Hendrickson. And there's an obvious link. There's an obvious link there between him and Anarumo, but we also know from last year that Trey Hendrickson wants to get paid again, and he's going to have suitors. So that's the tough part.
Yeah, actually, two links when you look at the Colts' new defensive line coach, Marion Hobby, who was with Lou Anarumo and Trey Hendrickson at that point where that Cincinnati defense was at its best and where Trey Hendrickson was blossoming as a player. I mean, just 2 years ago, he led the NFL in sacks at 17 and a half, and all three of those guys were in Cincinnati at that point. So this, when I saw that signing come through a few weeks ago on who the Colts' new defensive line coach was going to be, there was already some pretty heavy chatter about how great a fit Hendrickson would be with Indianapolis and what they need and who their what their personnel is at the moment and who Lou Anarumo is as their defensive coordinator. And then when you go and sign the defensive line coach that he blossomed under, just kind of makes you stop and wonder. I guess the biggest question is, you understand and maybe have some experience seeing how all of this cap stuff can work, and what is possible. Can the Colts, you think, now, as we stand on Thursday afternoon, knowing what has happened with Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce and where those situations presently are, not maybe what they could have done a couple weeks ago, is this a team that can sign all three of those guys, given where they are
Oh
from
yeah.
a financial standpoint? Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, they might have to restructure or cut some people, but yeah, they definitely. It's definitely possible. It's just a question of structure and everything like that. And the other thing is just what's going on that they haven't signed Jones yet. That's the other piece of it. But they, from a cap standpoint, they absolutely can find a way to get all three of them in.
Yeah. I mean, you start to think, and again, like all of this can change so quickly, with injury, but like you start to think of a defense with DeForest Buckner and Trey Hendrickson and Cam Bynum and Javarius Ward, presuming he comes back, and Sauce Gardner, like that starts to feel like a defense that really can do a lot. Knowing, again, in large part because of injury, because Buckner and Gardner and Mooney Ward all missed significant time in the back half of last year due to injury. Hendrickson, I guess, as well. Like you're rolling the dice a little bit on the all of those guys staying healthy and staying on the field, but that feels like a defense, with everyone out there that could really, um, really do some things next year. And if you are able to get Daniel and Alec back, and you've got your reliable offensive line, and you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Tyler Warren on a rookie deal like that. If all this comes together now, it really feels like this could be a team that could do a lot. It's just the question of, is there too little time, and have they kind of put themselves in a corner where where Alec Pierce testing the market and tagging Jones the way they have? Is it, are our minds going to be on the same wavelength to be willing to get all of this done? And that is what we will, I guess, have to wait and see, come Monday next week. Big, real big week. Again, some dates and times to remind you of. Monday, of course, at noon is when teams can formally start talking to other players, where can start seeing some deals come together. They can't formally, be announced, but you'll start to see some stuff, get leaked out, and get a fuller picture of how free agency is shaking out. And then Wednesday at 4 p.m. is when you can actually get some stuff set in stone. And I would imagine a couple days after that, say by Friday of next week, we'll have a pretty good sense of where this Colts roster is going to be outside of the draft, which of course is still 6 weeks or so away, and is a whole other part of all of this. The Colts are certainly not going to get everything, every hole filled. There's just way too many holes on the defensive side alone to do that simply through free agency. But it seems like, a lot of that work, I have to think, can be done in free agency. And Chris Ballard's got a lot of work to do to figure out a lot of looming questions here, as we hit the meat of the offseason here in the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that just sticks out is like, and this comes up every year, but like the question with the Colts and free agency is very rarely about what can they do. It's almost always about what are they doing, what will they do.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
That's
we will.
that's the thing. And for most of Chris Ballard's tenure, they haven't done enough.
We'll see if they can turn that around. Thanks again, as always, for listening to us here. However you are taking in the Colts Cover 2 podcast, please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube as we continue to try and grow that page. We will, if some big news happens next week, and whatever happens, I imagine, for better or worse, we will have some big things to talk about. We'll have some quick reaction videos posted there, clips of this podcast, of course, along with the entire podcast live there on our Colts YouTube page with Indy Star. Give us a like and a follow on whatever podcast platform you prefer, if that's how you enjoy listening to us. And as always, if you have a question or something you want us to tackle or thoughts, you can reach out over email or on social media. We will have lots of stories to either publish that have already been written or write over the next week or so, and appreciate your support, subscribing to Any Star and listening to us here yap about the Colts and their future. I'm sure we'll have a podcast next week to talk about everything that has gone on and what is to come. But for the latest on the Colts Cover 2 podcast, he's Joel A. Erickson. I'm Nathan Brown. We will catch you guys next week.